And again, I think it's a really important session because it's a session that it's an issue I think that we're all facing. It's a little bit like I suppose the world of work, the world of how we work has changed, and it probably isn't going to go backwards. So we're all facing into we're all probably transitioning from, I suppose, pre-COVID, we were all working at home pretty much full time. In the middle of COVID, for periods of time, we were working at home full time. And now we're moving to we're in a transition phase to what's called a blended or a hybrid working environment. And I think that creates opportunities and it creates challenges. And I think it's really important that we have a conversation about this here, because one of the most common questions I get asked and I ask is, what are you doing in your organization? How many days are you going into the office? How many days do you have to go into the office? And it's really interesting. And there's no right answer or wrong answer. And it probably varies from country to country, and it even varies within country. It probably even varies within the civil and public service within your own countries. But I really think it's interesting to kind of share experiences and to share knowledge. So how this session is going to work is we have a panel. We have Elsa Dooley from Albania, who is joining us remotely. We have Ingrid van den Verge, very close, from Belgium. We have Anil Arora from Canada. We have Mark Soden from New Zealand. And kind of leading us off is my own colleague from the CSO Ireland, Maria Hurley. And Maria is the head of corporate affairs in Ireland, and she has done a lot of work across the system in Ireland, actually devising the blended working policy for the Irish civil and public service. So she has done a lot of work in that area. So what we're going to do is we have questions that we're going to put to the panel members. So Maria is going to do a brief introduction, and she's going to give a presentation, about 15 minutes or there, and then we'll move on to the panel discussion. And I'm going to ask the first question to everybody, and then after that, I have a couple of questions that I'm going to leave it open to the panel members to jump in. And after the panel discussion, then at that point we will open it to the floor. And this is one of these sessions where I think we can have a really interactive session, because every single one of you will have something to say about your experience of blended working, whether or not it resonates with what you've heard from the panel or whatever else. And I really think it's important that we share this, because it's one of those things that I said that everybody's inquisitive about. What are you doing in your organization? What's your experience been? What's going to work for you? What do you think is going to work for you? What do you think the challenges are? What do you think the opportunities are? So I think we've a real opportunity to have a really good interactive conversation here. So prepare yourselves to make an intervention after the panel discussion. Okay, so that's enough from me. And I'm going to hand the floor to Maria Hurley. Maria, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Padraig, and good afternoon, everybody. The unenviable 2:30 slump, but I think given the topicality of the topic of today's presentation, it should be sufficient to keep everybody engaged, and particularly I'm looking forward to the contributions from this group in the Q&A that follows, because what I'm presenting to you on today is the culmination of work to date from the UNECE Capabilities and Communication Group, the task team group on the future of work, future job and reaching youth. And while we've been very busy for the last 2 years exploring these themes, we're very eager to hear from and be directed by your collective insight and experience as to how we should be taking our work forward in the coming period on this topic that is so relevant for all of us and for the future of our organizations. So a little bit of scene setting. Professional services organizations are now workplaces emphatically in transition. While many of us may have had the experience in the pre-COVID era of an expectation from our people for increasing varieties of workplace flexibilities, the enforced home working mandate that almost universally applied, at least in the initial period of the COVID-19 pandemic, has substantially and irrevocably shifted the structure of how people in professional service delivery, such as our organizations, can do their work. And that model has been proven. There is now an expectation across government, across businesses and very much across our workforces, that the way they work in the future and the flexibilities afforded to them as professionals in the exercise of their highly skilled functions has changed, and we will never again revert to the full 5-day on-site working model of the past. In particular, in our task team, we have also given consideration to the changing face of our workforce, because while I look around the room here today and I see many generations reflected, it is inevitable as we navigate our careers that when we look over our shoulders, we see the youth racing up behind us. And the youth of today in our workplaces are those who fall into the categories of millennials or Gen Zs. And knowledge workers from those two generations in particular have expectations for how they will work into the future that may be quite distinctive and different from the expectations we may have had at their age. And I've got some data further on in the slide to illustrate that variance in expectation that we need to be terribly aware of, both as employers of the future and in particular on the statistical side as data collectors of the future, because these are also increasingly our respondents and we need to be able to engage with them meaningfully as respondents as much as staff. And I've just thrown in the final bullet of this slide that employee well-being focus is also an emerging trend. This really came to the fore during the pandemic period, because once the immediate practicalities of designing a workplace that was remote had been addressed, we then had to engage with the challenges at the human level that many of our people faced. And now as we move into a blended working future, those challenges are being amplified in important respects. So we have to be very mindful of those and structure the supports we have in place for our people to enable them to give their best to us so that we can be the best organizations that we can possibly be. And don't take my word for it, or don't take the word of the task team on this issue of the importance of well-being. This slide shows you the results from a 2021 Deloitte Global Human Capital Trends Survey, Human Capital Trends Survey, in which senior executives and individual workers were asked to rank characteristics of importance for them in giving meaning to the work that they do. And if you look at individual worker response, you will see in third place that improving worker well-being features. Whereas for the senior executives, improving worker well-being was at number 8. And I think we need to pause and reflect very significantly on this, because in the knowledge industry, how our workers feel about the work they do is at least as important as the actual output they produce, because the former directly impacts the latter. So, potted history during 2020 and 2021, the Capabilities and Communications Task Team under the UNECE HLG MOS focused on the future of work. And we examined what the NSIs that we had contact with had learned from their pandemic experience. We've done more this year, and I'm going to talk very shortly about a survey that we've just completed. We developed a framework to enable us to try to segment the various strands of work that needed to be undertaken to construct a model that will work for all of us going forward. And that framework comprised 3 toolkits: an employer toolkit, an employee toolkit, and a manager toolkit. This is a picture of the front page of the toolkit, which is available on the UNECE Stats Wiki page, but it's just the beginning. It's a very incomplete resource at the moment, and that's one of the reasons I'm talking to you all about it today, because I'm hoping that through future collaboration, we'll be able perhaps to build out the content of this resource to make it very useful for all of us as a community of geospatial experts and statisticians. So first of all, just a taste of the employer toolkit. So under the banner of the employer toolkit, we tried to understand from a very sort of a legalistic and structural perspective, what are the hard must-do dimensions of moving into a safe and appropriately equipped hybrid or blended working future? What are the key enablers, particularly focusing on technology and the physical supports to enable our colleagues to give of their best so we can be at our best? And from a people and culture perspective, in particular thinking about the importance of the values with which we work. How do we protect and enshrine those values as much in a blended workplace as in a physical workplace? On the employee front, then, we examined both mindset and behaviors. So that is the attitude that we bring to how we work in this new and very flexible and dynamic space of where we work, and the behaviors that are important for us to display to collaborate productively and successfully in a blended or hybrid working future. Have the skills that we require changed? Well, clearly, as professionals in our respective fields, not necessarily, but the skills of communication, engagement, and collaboration in a blended or a hybrid workspace are quite different to those necessary for successful face-to-face engagement. So we need to focus on that. And the workplace environment. If you are creating a home workspace, it must also meet certain minimum standards. So from an employee perspective, we focused on understanding what those were too. And finally, perhaps the most relevant of the toolkits, the manager toolkit, because of all of the challenges that have emerged in the professional space throughout COVID. The challenge of being a manager and successfully supporting our teams on-site, off-site, somewhere in between site has become really a significant point of difficulty in some cases. And the skills that our managers require to navigate in this space require particular attention going forward. So with the toolkits in our back pockets, what does that mean for us as NSIs and geospatial offices? Well, we know, as referenced earlier when we mentioned millennials and Gen Z, that going forward, we need to attract the right people into this new blended working environment. But we also need to protect and safeguard the culture and values which are so integral to the successful execution of our duties, which are in the service of the public and a public good. We need to respond to the demand from our staff and in most cases from our governments to promote blended working for a variety of policy reasons as one of a range of desired workplace flexibilities in an environment where recruitment and retention are increasingly challenging. And I might specifically mention here in an environment where, and this came through very strongly in our surveys, many of our organizations struggle with salary as an incentive. Therefore, other incentives are growing in importance as part of the overall employee benefits package. And who is our future talent pool and how do we retain them? Well, an appropriate hybrid or blended working environment can be a contributor to that. So we grew between 2021 and 2022 from one single subgroup looking at the future of work to three. Future of work toolkits. I've just shown you a preview of the toolkits, a group very particularly focusing on understanding how the job of the future is changing relative to the past, and a third group looking at reaching youth, both as data subjects and as staff of today and very much more of tomorrow. We ran a survey. We were so delighted and with great thanks to the UNECE Secretariat to say that as of last night, and indeed a survey response came in last night, so this is hot off the press, latest data, we have responses from 41 countries. This tells us quite how timely and relevant this discussion is. With thanks in particular to GGIM colleagues who also participated in the survey, giving us an added layer of richness in the responses. Our subgroups are currently analysing those survey responses, but just to give you a flavour of what you have told us. So a very high proportion of our organisations have already implemented or are in the process of developing formal blended working frameworks. In some countries, those frameworks are designed to directly reflect codified or strictly defined blended working arrangements to apply across the civil and public service. And it's quite obvious that some level of blended working is an inevitable component of how we will organize our work into the future. However, the survey also shows us that how we are preparing for that future varies considerably across the globe. And in particular, it would appear that there are gaps between having a policy that designates how many days of the week we must attend physically in an office or we may work from another location, and having wraparound supports that define the ways that we will work as we go forward to get the best from our people. Focus on well-being is particularly patchy in the responses analysed to date, and relatively little reference to the importance of protecting culture and values. This bears particular noting if we look at this data. This is 2021 data from Slack. So we'll take it for what it's worth. A report on remote work in the age of COVID-19. And this was in response to a question about those who believe that working from home is worse than the alternative. And the responses come from newly remote workers, i.e. pandemic period enforced remote workers versus experienced remote workers. And we can see from this data that across the measures of a sense of belonging at work, productivity at work, and overall satisfaction with work engagements, our newer blended or remote workers, those who have least experience and have most recently come to this way of working, are finding it tough on those dimensions. And that's not just a problem at the individual level. Clearly, it represents a challenge for us at the organizational level. So, as geospatial organizations and NSIs, do we just rock on doing the same as we did before in another workspace? Well, this Deloitte this slide from the same Deloitte Human Capital Trends Survey 2021 that I mentioned earlier shows us that introducing digital collaboration platforms is a really important component of successfully moving into blended working. Flexibility and personal choice in determining how people work, how they actually achieve their objectives. Establishing new scheduling and meeting norms. The hybrid meeting is a very different creature to the face-to-face meeting, or indeed the fully virtual meeting. Inclusion and diversity being particular challenges in this space. Investing in team leader training, our toolkit reference the very particular challenges for managers in the blended working environment. And then the hygiene factors of adequate home internet access and reconfiguring the physical workspace in the home. Interestingly, on this slide, we will see that offering new wellbeing resources is relatively low down on the scale, but there does seem to be a particular generational influence on answers to that question. So we're all over this, aren't we? We have it all sorted. In fact, why are we even having this conversation here today? Well, we're physically well advanced, the survey would suggest. The actual practical modalities of blended working, by and large, are in place. We have, to some extent, new collaboration platforms, perhaps still grappling with how to use them best, but that will come along the road. But the business rules around how we do things are not universally in place. So those how we get things done around here, handbooks need to be updated, as does learning and development support for all of our people, but in particular leaders and managers, and this focus on workplace well-being, team building in a hybrid environment. I'll skip over this slide. This is from a Deloitte Insights report, levers that we can focus on to try to invest in workplace well-being. This presentation will be available after the fact, so you can have a look at that slide at your leisure. But just a reminder that our people do have expectations. So this is a Gallup.com 2021 survey. 4 things Gen Z and millennials expect from their workplace. And if you look across the generations, it's very interesting to note that well-being features in first place from young millennials and Gen Z and older millennials, whereas Gen X and baby boomers have different focuses. They're not radically apart, but you can see a direction of travel here, and we would do well to heed it. This slide, again, I won't linger too much on it. This is another Gen Z millennial survey, 2022 from Deloitte, things that matter to those generations, and it's good work-life balance, learning and development opportunities, salary or other benefits, features, but it's a hygiene factor. Can't do without it, but once it's adequate, the other wraparounds become very important. So, it's not just stats and mapping that are changing. The world around us has changed, and we're very much part of it and engaged in it. If we want to respond to its demands, we need to move with the times. Are we ready? On to the panel discussion.
Okay, Maria, so thank you very much. I think that's a really useful scene setting, and hopefully that's provoked some reaction and some thoughts from yourselves and resonates, or maybe even doesn't resonate. But again, hopefully it'll lead to an active discussion after we have the panel discussion. So I'm going to move on to the panel discussion. And as I've said, we have Elsa from Albania, Ingrid from Belgium, Anil from Canada, and Mark from New Zealand. So we've a broad spectrum. No Gen Zs, I think, though, Maria, or millennials, perhaps. I'm not sure. I have to be very careful what I say. That's my first mistake of the day. Well, it's not my first mistake. One of many other mistakes in the day. But maybe we might just start off with a kind of an open leading question. And I'm going to go to Elsa first, who is with us virtually, and then I'll go to Ingrid, then Anil, and then Mark in that order. But the question is this. Clearly, we are a diverse community, and we'll have our own particular national characteristics. From your particular national and organizational perspective, what are the key challenges and opportunities you associate with responding to expectations and pressures around post-COVID working modalities? So that's a mouthful. Elsa, you have about 2 to 3 minutes max. Each person has 3 minutes max. So best of luck with that.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I have to express my pleasure to be part of this distinguished panel. And now, considering the challenges created due to the pandemic situation, in fact, our statistical office, even as a small office, had to immediately react and adapt to continue the work processes considering the restrictions. Some of the actions presented as a challenges, in fact, became a new opportunities for our office. For some of the surveys, the different data collection techniques that were used during that period continue to be used even today, that we have more relaxed restrictions. We had to adapt methodology and methods for some of surveys, and because the quality indicators resulted to be good, we continue to use these methods even nowadays. We took actions to ensure the continuity and to be sustainable by investing in the IT infrastructure and, in fact, by using innovative approach. On the other side, the introduction of a remote access environment for a remote facility that anonymized microdata was good opportunity for us and for our users. As a result, now the number of remote users is increased considerably. On the other side, telecommuting channels to establish mechanisms for secure communications were used and continue to be used. For developing capacity, e-learning was used as a tool for continuity learning and acquiring new skills. On the management side, the monitoring system in real time of statistical activities and management issues facilitate communication within the headquarters in the institution and with regional offices. The work from home modality, in fact, for some of the statistical departments, due to the need to use the databases and to be present at the office, was at first a challenge, but due to the above mentioned, such as monitoring and communication channels, we are working on this to become a good opportunity as well for the future. In conclusion, even though we had to take decisions and change some of our working procedure forced by the situation, on the other hand, we were faced with some opportunities which resulted to be positive for our working process and future plans. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elsa. And it's a real sense of every challenge is also an opportunity, and it sounds very much like you're taking it. Ingrid, your perspective.
Well, in our office, we were just going to move from one office to another, so everything was packed, and we had decided to shift to more flexibility in terms of working at home. So we seem to be completely ready, because the day before the lockdown, we were everybody was ready to move to the new office and stay at home for a week. Now this week was a bit longer, and unfortunately, the challenge that we face now is how to convince certain group of people to come back to the office, because they say we did work well during the 1.5 years, and I must say they did. So the reasons to convince people, it's a difficult message to say, well, there are reasons why you should be in the office. And being in the office, we can see those reasons. There is a huge amount of stress in the organization, because all informal communication and all non-verbal communication has disappeared. It's only what's on paper or what is said in the Teams meeting. And this is very biased. It's not complete. And so we see people, there are big misunderstandings, people that don't know, why do you talk like that to me? And people don't understand why the reaction is like that. And this is a very complex thing to manage. And so we had to install a stress management group in our office where the people who were feeling this stress could talk to, and they could organize team meetings about it, but still there was we had to install a very important channel to capture this and to make sure people could ventilate their frustration and their stress. And this could be related because they had to work at home and the children were there and their husband was there and they had to do everything and it's what not fair. I even had people come to the office with a medical certificate saying they have to come to the office. But now I have people with a medical certificate that they cannot come to the office. So it is complicated. And this adherence to the group, we see small groups have worked well. They had informal coffee breaks every day. We encouraged them to do that. We had a sudden death of one of our staff. And so we organized an online remembrance ceremony. It was wonderful and people really felt together at that point. But still, it is not normal. It's not normal never to meet. And so we are changing even though we were prepared to do a lot of teleworking, we already had shared offices. We have a long tradition of people working from their home. Still, we will have to do additional changes so that more people, when people are together in the office, we call it the co-creation space. That's where you do things together. But also you hang out at the coffee machine and you ask about someone which you've only seen in 2D, and then suddenly you see this person in real life and you can see that there's something and you can ask how he's feeling and so on. So this is for us very important, how to consolidate this new way of working in a way that it also matches our processes and procedures, because in this pandemic, some usual procedures have been thrown overboard. You had to ask before going to do some homework. Now you have to reinstall them somehow. So there is a lot of work to be done in redefining process and procedures, come back to normality, but the new normal, and so adapt certain things.
Okay, no, it's really interesting. Not normal, never to me. I see Maria laughing because that could be me saying the same thing. But what's really interesting is the communications and the stress. I mean, these are real things that we're having. We probably never have to manage at the same scale before. And I think that's really important. And I have another observation, but I'll make that later on. Anil, you have the floor.
Well, thanks, Patrick. It just so happens that last week in Canada was National Public Service Week. So as they say, how do you say 1,000 words? You show a picture, and then you say, well, how do you show 1,000 pictures? You show a video. So I'm just going to turn to Stella there to see if we can tee up a video to answer the very questions that Patrick just put on. So
that's cheating, Anil. You just don't want to talk.
You didn't say I couldn't, so here we go.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Anil, we can't hear you.
You're on mute.
Anil, you're on mute.
We can't hear you.
You're on mute.
Can you hear me now? I'm Anil Aurora. Well, as you can see, we've all gotten used to working remotely, and it's not without the occasional hiccup. But make no mistake, we've managed to making working from home completely possible. And now we have the chance to shape a new future that enables a true hybrid way of working. I'm really excited to welcome you back to our buildings across the country as we work together to create spaces that meet our future needs, to experiment, and to better understand what works best in what format. We're working hard and need your help to create a workplace that focuses on the people who make StatCan what it is. No matter where you are in the efficient and effective service to Canadians, your work directly contributing to helping Canadians push on during a global pandemic, both an economic and climate crisis and various other challenges, as you know. It's been inspiring to watch all of you in action and humbling to be part of such an amazing team. You should be proud of that. I sure am. I also want you to know our offices are open and they're safe. When you come in, you'll notice some changes. Our space is starting to become more accessible and flexible. This will foster a new way of working together once again. All of this gives us the edge we need to modernize how to best deliver results for all Canadians. We're going to build this future of the workplace together. This week, if we're at the office in the National Capital Region, in a regional office across Canada, or at home, I hope you took the opportunity to celebrate what we've achieved together and equally create our future workplace together.
Happy National Public Service Week, and thank you for everything that you've done. I hope to see you very soon.
Are you going to say a few words now?
If the chair lets me, sure. Look, a lot of the challenges that Maria put on the slides, I think a lot of us started to work on those challenges long before the pandemic. I think what the pandemic showed us was that that's the direction that we need to go in. And I think, as was mentioned earlier, in terms of millennials and Gen Zs, they're saying that we want a place that is reflective of our values. They want a place that is accessible and equitable in terms of access and reach. And so what we need to do is to make sure that we don't create two cultures. Now, those that have issues with microaggressions at the office or have accessibility issues, they never come in, right? They want to work from home, or vice versa. People who want to see a more sustainable future, they want to make sure that what we do is aligned to the vision and the purpose of what they do best. And so this hybrid future is not about space, frankly. That space part is the easiest part. It's about the culture and the values. And so we're putting a lot of focus in ensuring that our managers are equipped to make sure that they can deal with those questions that come up. And I'm sure that in subsequent parts of this conversation, we can get into a lot more detail. But we're building charters, we're building toolkits, we're giving the resources to the management so that they can actually respond to the future culture of our institution. And that means that, they're going to have a charter that says we all agree to come in at a certain point, because it's about the organization's need for flexibility and it's the employees' need for flexibility. And guess what? They don't always match. And what we need to do is to have those conversations and then to codify them in these agreements and then move forward. And there'll be some minimum amounts in there. Some teams will say, want to come in a minimum of 2 days, and others will say, we want to come in a minimum of 4 days. So we're looking at telework arrangements. We're also maximizing the ability for us to draw talent from the entire country. That is a really important part of us, because we want the diversity of thoughts and the talents. And I think that'll also help us in terms of attracting new talent and retaining new talent. So as I say, we've been on this journey. And I think for us, the pandemic just said, this is the right way. Keep going and actually accelerate things.
Okay, so Mark, will we play your video now or afterwards?
No, I can't quite compete with the video, but what I can do is very much pick up where Anil left off, because our journey was quite similar. So we were looking at working from home and remote working and making that actually a feature of our workplace even before the pandemic hit, and we were actually using it as a marketing tool to compete for talent in the market. As was the broader public service. So our Public Service Commission, which is the governing body for the public service, was also encouraging us to move to that direction. We had a public service mandate of flexible by default even before the pandemic. So just like Anil was describing, we were moving in this direction anyway. The other thing I would say by way of context is New Zealand's lockdown experience was different than most of yours. So because we were a small island in the bottom of the world, we actually managed to lock the country down and pretty much keep COVID at bay for 2 years, largely until the Omicron variant turned up. And so what happened is we had short lockdowns. So rather than one long lockdown where, like many of you had, we had a series of 2 or 3 short lockdowns where people would be working at home compulsorily for 2, maybe 3 months, and then coming back to the office and then going back home. So we got quite a bit of practice at that transition, and people got quite a lot of practice at that mixed mode mixed mode working. But we did a lot, just as Anil talked about and others have talked about, and as the survey showed, we did a lot around how do we help people get used to working at home, and how do we help them deal with some of the stresses of working from home? And we produced toolkits for employees about that. But we put a lot of emphasis on leadership and people leadership, and equipping our people leaders to be able to work with their teams. And so helping them do things around maintaining that team cohesion when your teams are not all in the office at the same time, and some of them are not in the office at all. What are some things you can do to make sure you do have those team catch-ups and you do have those little micro team interactions? Some of our teams, our newspapers have things like daily quizzes, and before we all left the offices, there was quite a tradition of, sort of 10 o'clock in the morning, get around and have a cup of coffee and do the daily quiz. So we started our managers actually doing that sort of thing online, and making a real effort to do that, making a real effort to check in on their staff well-being, and actually saying to managers right from me down, giving the message to our managers to say, actually, stop doing some of the output and actually take more care of your people. This is going to be more of an effort for you to take more care of your people. And that's lasted into the post-pandemic environment. So we don't have a firm policy. What we do, to say that you have to be in the office 1 day a week or 2 days or whatever. What we do is we leave it for the teams to work that out. And we are very clear, we do expect give and take. So we do expect that, there will be times when we do want all staff in the office. We, certainly some of our production teams at different points in the production cycle, we have them, so say our national accounts teams, we have them in the office at different points in the production cycle. And then at other points we have more flexibility around working from home. Probably so we've put a lot of effort into the policies and support. Probably the other observation I'd just make based on the presentation was we did have some of the angst and stress that went with everyone working from home. But what we found is that actually, as people started to be able to work from home as they chose rather than because they had to, people started to work according to their work environment. So we didn't have a lot of people at home who were under stress because their work environment wasn't great. Those people chose to come to the office. And so that's been part of it, as well as that settling down in terms of it being a norm. But look, I think this is very much the way of the future, as Anil and others have said. For me, this is now a marketing thing for us, and we are probably ahead of a range of other government agencies within New Zealand in terms of the way we do this, and we do that very explicitly. We market that. We go out, in terms of what appeals to the new workforce. We go out and talk about that flexibility and talk about the ability to do other things with your lives as well as work, and that's a real appeal for some of our potential staff. So look, I'll leave it there, but again, like others, a big focus on values and culture, and happy to talk about how we do some of that, but I'll leave it there for the moment.
Okay, thanks, Mark. And it's a real sense of, even though we had slightly different experiences, we've had the same challenges. But interestingly, you're really flipping it onto the opportunities. And I kind of wrote down we're competing for talent in the market, and that was. I think I remember a number of years ago, we need to provide a modern work environment. I think, Anil, it was in Seoul, I think maybe 5 years ago, we were talking about the need for a modern work environment. So really interesting how external drivers can push us in a direction we probably should have been going in anyway. But I suppose it's after pushing it's there that bit quicker. Okay, so look, we'll move on to a second question. I don't want everyone to feel they need to jump in. So maybe if we get 2 people per question. So fingers on the buzzers. So question 2 is this. As official statisticians and geospatial experts, we are professionals with highly sought after skills working in very specialist functions with national significance. To what extent do our core values in official statistics or geospatial equivalents bring obligations or opportunities as we face the future battle for talent and demand for a flexible way of working? How should we leverage these core values in positioning ourselves in the future world of work? How do we embed these core values in the mindset of our people? I think that really touches on the core values. Sometimes you pick up the core values by osmosis, just by being around people physically and meeting them in the corridor or over a cup of coffee. But how do we ensure we don't lose that when we're working in remote environments, when we might have 900 different offices actually, rather than 2 or 3 offices or whatever it is? So I don't know, who wants to take that first? Fingers on the buzzers? Anybody fingers on the buzzers? Ingrid, you're up.
Always in to go first. I think one of the important messages to leading people in organizations is walk the talk. If you have values which you say they're important, if you say respect is important, well, then start by respecting your people. If you don't walk the talk, then your values are just empty slogans. So I think that's the most important message. And this goes for everybody. So even the person in charge of the cleaning ladies should be respectful to her team as much as the director general should be respectful to that team. And so I think that's the first part. And the second thing, second idea I would like to bring here is if you think working together is important, well, then you should encourage that and you should celebrate together, because the best way of working together is to celebrate your success. And this can be celebrate coming back to the office, like I saw in this nice video. We had a very belated very late housewarming party just a few weeks ago, because it was the first time people were actually allowed to come all to the office, and we had a housewarming. It was a great event. People were just very happy. We also celebrated all the people who retired during the pandemic. We had a lot of people going out without any drink or bye-bye speech or whatsoever. So we invited them all together to the office, and we had a big party. And these are the things that you really need to do. And people will think that, well, you know, that's when do we work? Well, the work will come if this is done.
I like it. Walk the talk. Very interesting. Maybe Mark, because you had touched on the talent piece.
Yeah, thanks. So, I mean, a little bit the same. So we launched. So, just by way of context, so I've been in the government statistician role in New Zealand for just on a couple of years, or a little bit over a couple of years. So we revised some of our, value statements and our strategy during the time of the pandemic. So we had to find ways to actually engage staff on that as part of the remote working arrangements, which was interesting. But surprisingly, staff were very keen to come along and actually talk at some of the virtual workshops. I did a lot in terms of, I did actually have a video, not quite as flash as my colleagues, but I did actually have a video about the core values of the organization, which drew quite heavily on the core values of official statistics, but also included things around creating an inclusive workplace and a diverse workplace, which is really important to us, again, from that marketing perspective. And then as we got people back into work, or back into the workplace, we did very similar things. We had welcome back parties, that kind of thing. We've actually just built a new building in Wellington. So literally while I've been away, the office has moved into the bulk of our staff have moved from one building to another in Wellington. And that's set up around a lot of our core values. There's lots of stuff on the walls about values. There's lots of stuff around collaborative workplaces, which allow us to do that. It's a custom designed building for collaborative working. So there's a lot about the infrastructure, but then again, I would go back to what do we do with our people leaders, and being very clear that our people leaders' first and foremost role is to uphold and ensure and enshrine these values in the workplace by talking about them all the time, doing activities with their staff about them, and as my colleague said, very much leading by example and walking the talk. So it's a lot of small things. There's no one thing that you can do, but just a lot of really dedicated focus, I would say.
Do you want to add anything, Neil or Ailsa? Do you want to say anything?
Well, I just, what we found out over the last 2 years is it's not the building that holds us together, it's our values, and a little bit of infrastructure helps too. So, and really it was about playing that up. And that's exactly what we're doing is saying, this is, we of course have our own institutional values that are aligned to the, to the fundamental principles and the values. And it's about how do you fuel curiosity to create greater value? How do you, and that means that people are going to have to come together to try and, innovate and do things. And so we're trying to build in this kind of notion of work with the values, with something that is pragmatic and practical, that kind of unites people even further. Because that's my biggest fear, is that this last 2 years has actually divided people. And coming back, there are very different opinions by different generations about what their preferences are. And we actually did personas during the course of the pandemic, which showed a single mom has a very different set of indicators in terms of likes and dislikes than somebody who's a year or two away from retirement. And yet at the end of the day, there's some very practical things that people want to know the answers to. Do I buy a bus pass? Do I get a car? Do I get a parking pass? Do I worry about daycare for my kids? So there, yes, it's good to say work it out, okay, and I trust you, but I think there are lots and lots of people that want some direction, and so that's why we're formalizing many of these at the section levels. Yes, so this is the period between now and about September to experiment, to come up with these agreements, and then in September you have some assurance in terms of what the rules of the game are. So high level principles and values are good, but they have to kind of come down to very practical guidance. And the idea there is that people have the ability to have some autonomy and some input into that. Not ultimate flexibility, but we have to figure out, what that is. The last thing I'll put on the table is we did a survey for the entire public service in Canada, and we found that 75% of our executives are completely stressed out. They have mental health issues that they feel are really significant. Their mental health has gone down. The next layer below that is not a whole lot better. And the most of them feel that there isn't enough time to recharge. So, again, this is, yes, there's a space and a physical component, but I keep coming back to this is a change of culture. And so we're also embedding in there this notion of greater autonomy, not just pushing work down to them. That's not autonomy, but actually saying, okay, how can we let you lead as leaders so that we can help you manage and, have the kind of supports that are there. So I think the physical part's the easy part. I think it's all the culture part and all those other aspects. And we're putting a lot of emphasis on that. And we're going to experiment. We're going to try things. We probably won't get all of them right on the first go.
Okay, that's really interesting. I mean, just listening to you about the levels of stress, the pressure, and then you just reflect on what we've discussed yesterday and this morning, and actually the sheer scale of the actual job we're trying to do on top of that. It's a real kind of it's really point in time for us as leaders and managers where we really need to step up and show the path. So that's a really interesting it's a really interesting picture because it's very similar to the picture you've told, Ingrid, and it'd be really interesting to hear if it's reflected and others are seeing the same thing. I'm not ignoring you, Marcus. Don't worry. I'm going to come to you. Don't worry. But leave it up. No, leave it up. Don't take it down. I'm going to move on to the third question. And Elsa, I'm going to throw this to you first of all, actually. So this is the question. We are learning that Gen Z have a different way of viewing the balance between work and life goals. As employers of the future and as public bodies with a remit to connect across the full spectrum of society, inevitably we are moving towards a recruitment wave focused on Gen Z with their different worldview, different value system, very different workplace expectations. How do we prepare to maintain our relevance and attractiveness to younger people? And how do we align with them for to appeal to retain both staff, to retain them both as staff and as data subjects? So just a bit of a typo there, but I hope you get the gist of the question, Elsa. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. In fact, I mentioned that we adapt our work, we adapt our statistical activities, we adapt our methods, our methodologies, we invest on our infrastructure. But in fact, we are adapted by ourselves on the new culture, on the new situation that was created by the COVID. As we as a manager were adapted as well, our staff, our new generation, it's to be adapted based on our requirement. In fact, the youth are our future, and as such, we focus on researching on their needs and expectations. As referred to the question about the GZ, is the generation of the digitalization, and as part of our focus, we try to organize in our institutions internships so that they are able to get to know the working models better while we understood their needs and their expectations. They need to, in fact, to have some general information before starting. They need to have more information about the salary level. They need to have information about the work-life balance, job duties they'd be working on professional growth opportunities. They need to know about the flexibility, how much flexible they will be in the working days. Another reference as well is the revision of working criteria in accordance with the digital changes in the work market. As we know now, the work market is changing day by day, and the new generation needs to be much more informed about how the work market is today. Use of the latest technology, not only in the production process, but as well in the communication and in the visualization, is a necessity to be reflected as well in our work environment, not only for the existing staff, but as well and for the recruitment of the new generation. As a new generation, in fact, they are more familiar with the technology and it's better to have them on board. But first, we need to identify them as we need to learn them by implementing the new methods, the new approaches towards improving digitalization, and stay relevant by keeping the value and the culture of official statistics. Those are some important elements that we need to take into consideration during the recruitment of the new generation for nowadays. Thank you.
Thanks, Elsa. I think you really captured the challenge associated with kind of integrating Gen Zs. So who else is trying to integrate Gen Zs here? I mean, it is a particular challenge given that we're not Gen Zs, and they're actually quite strong-minded, which is good, but we need to tap into that. Mark, tell us how you've done it.
If only I could. But I think it's a combination of all of the things. What we're focusing on is a combination of all of the things that we've spent the last half hour or so talking about. So predominantly Gen Z do want to come to a workplace that has strong values, or work in an organization that has values that they can adhere to. So the work we're doing around talking those values up and making those values really clear and trying to connect with their values-based approach to life. Whilst I absolutely agree about the fact that it's not about the physical workplace or just about the physical workplace, actually in New Zealand, people of this generation do have expectations around what does a modern workplace look like? What's the technology that you can use? How are there different spaces that you can use to collaborate rather than just, if you do come to work, sitting at a desk all day? So setting up your workplace for that. It's about the flexibility around being able to mix your work and your life that we've just talked about, and what are your policies around that. But it's also about, inclusivity. And so we've had a big focus on how do you create an inclusive workplace, and how do you create a workplace where your staff can bring their full selves to work. That's our tagline that we've been using. And so they do feel that they can actually come and be part of the workplace, part of the organizational culture, and still be themselves. And that seems to be a big attracting factor for us too.
Yes, I kind of agree on everything that was said by our colleague, but I have to look even a little bit further, because on the labor market, there is not enough people that do the job we want them to come and do for us. So we have a very big problem of convincing people to choose our line of work, and we have to convince younger people. So it's, once they're on the labor market, you have to convince them to come to you, but first you have to get them there. And so we do quite try to do efforts, and I would like to encourage all of you to do this effort, to talk to people around you, young people that are 15, 16 years old, and that they have to choose, what will I study? What will be my life choice? And if you see around, if you look at Greta Thunberg and all those wonderfully engaged people, they want to save the world. That's their thing. They want to save the world, especially the girls. And we need more girls in our business. I don't know about statistics. I know there it's better, but in the geospatial world, it's a male world. And there is not enough men that come to work for us. So we need a female to come for us. And so my point is, we should encourage young people to choose our line of business. And we don't do that by telling them, you can come to us and do this terribly boring work, which is extremely difficult and for which you have to have brilliant brains. They won't do that. So we have to convince them, if you want to save the world, well, you have to come and work in geospatial or in statistics, because that's how you save the world, by knowing what's happening. And so these are the kind of things we should do. And you all know young people around you who are in this life phase of having to choose. Well, talk about your job, passionate. Show them how fun it is to work in this field, and then maybe they can be convinced to do this. Thank you.
Ingrid, I think you should do a video. Definitely a video. Anil, how do you follow that?
Poorly. That was brilliant, by the way. I love it. I wrote lots of notes, which is great. Yeah, I agree with obviously everything my colleagues have said so far. But, you know, as you said, most of us are Gen Z wannabes. I think most of us are on our way the other way. So, you know, what's the reality? What do, right? We bring people in and then we tell them that, you know, we're all about them, right? And then we say in week one, here's a 20-year-old tool, you know, so forget everything you learned in school. We're going to teach you SAS, or we're going to teach you something else. Yeah, no, that's ours, what they learned in school. We teach them something else. And then what do? We give them, you know, we give them an office or whatever. And then we say, okay, we really welcome your ideas. So you have to take them through these 20 committees. And at every committee, we're going to tell you how stupid that idea is. And we're going to make sure that you never come back with a good idea. I think we have to turn the organization around. And that's kind of what we've been doing as well, which is reshaping the leadership. Leadership and governance is not about, you know, killing ideas, but it's about saying, I'll take the risk. Okay, what do you need? How can we make this happen? And that's what we've been doing the last 2 years. And you know what? They're better at it than we are. Let me be honest. Some of the things that I would have said, no, that won't work. They made it work. And so, you know, the problem is us. The problem is the system that we have. The problem is the tools that we've got. And so I think, you know, simple notion, if they are the future, let them build the future. And what we need to do is just kind of, you know, maybe guide a little bit, mentor a little bit. And frankly, they are much better at drawing a data-driven future because that's what they're trained in. And so they give us the evidence, they tell us what we need to do. And then what do? We tell them that our wisdom is better than their data. And so we have to actually live what we're all about, what we preach others to do. And that's exactly what we're doing. So, and it comes back to sort of checking our own motives, checking on our own egos at the door, and actually giving them the chance to do things. And when things fail, which they will, we need to stand up and say, you know what, that's okay. It's my fault. I'll take care of it. So it's a culture change again, in terms of truly welcoming the Gen Zs. So I love what you said. Absolutely. Totally agreed. There you go.
Okay. So a breakout of agreement here at the top table. So I have a fourth question, but I'm not going to go to it because I really want to involve the audience here. I think we need to hear from the floor, because people, you have to have your own opinions. Certainly that conversation has to stimulate some thoughts. And I'm not going to share mine right now. I mightn't share them at all, but I see, first of all, so please don't be shy, put up your flags. We want to hear even your observations on what you have heard, your own experiences, or even a question to a panel member. So Marcus, you have the floor.
First, I'd like to thank someone who got the idea to organize this kind of discussion here. It's a discussion has been really interesting and lovely. And in a sense, that I have a feeling that we all have very similar values regarding how this kind of business of running our offices should be carried out. Of course, the practical solutions may differ in Finland, we are in perhaps in very liberal end, in the sense that our new normal is that we will require people come to office on average 4 or 5 days per month, but we have already now said that we will see how it will work and perhaps change the kind of the rule after, let's say, 6 months or something like that. And but still, what is important, even the practical arrangements may vary, but we all understand that the steering this kind of academic expert work is like tuning a violin. You cannot do it with a hammer. So basically, you need something more soft, and you need to cope with the motivation and things like that. But okay, and now the question, because you are all very experienced and brilliant people, can you tell me what is the difference doing statistics and other academic office expert work? What is there something in our business which should guide us into different solutions than other government agencies or other, let's say, private agencies? Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. And I certainly feel like using a sledgehammer to tune things sometimes. But anyway, and normally end up breaking them. Who wants to answer the question from Marcus, though? What is it that's different about official statistics and other areas of work? Who'd like to?
If you like, I can just kick it off.
Yeah.
There are 3 things that come to mind immediately. First is, in our statistical agency, people come and they spend their entire career, pretty much. So people have a very long-term view of what they do in career and so on. Okay, and so that comes with it certain expectations of career development.
But not in ICT. ICT people comes and goes.
They come and go. Yeah, it would, every the next job. So the purpose, the vision, the difference that we make in society, those alignment with values are not just a tagline and I worked in a couple of policy departments, so I know they really, really take them to heart. And second thing is that we're very operational. I mean, we put out data on a daily basis, and so there's a kind of a, you're always going, you're always, there's something that you're always kind of working towards. So there's deliverables, so you can see the work. And in a policy department, it's hard to tell whether your policy was, maybe in a generation you might see, so the instant kind of value that you get. And the third thing that I think is really different is that we work in an integrated way, and we're doing more and more of that. So it's not, we're not just putting data out, we're actually making sense and meaning. And to me, that reaching out to other disciplines, because of the frameworks that we've developed, they're rich. They actually force us to work horizontally together with other parts of our agency and with other parts of the institutions, with academics and others. So again, I think those are 3. I'm sure my colleagues have more, but those are 3 things that come to mind immediately why we're different.
Thanks, Anil. Who else wants to? Mark, do you want to say something? Yeah.
Just to build on what you said, Anil, I think that the thing that we find interest a lot of Gen Zs that come to our organization is the opportunity to do cool stuff. So, so it's how do you talk up both the impact that cool stuff has, but actually the opportunity to do stuff that they wouldn't get to do in other organizations. So, we've got a little data sort of data lab hub of very bright people who we throw problems to, and just say, spend a month trying to solve that problem. And so the opportunity to have that freedom to think about things differently, new data sources, the opportunity to do the sort of stuff that they might have read about before, and actually still have an impact, I think, is being able to talk that up and being able to talk about the ability to do that and the impact that has been something quite powerful, in addition to the things that Anil mentioned, I think.
Yeah.
One of the things I think that makes us, and then I talk about geospatial as well as statistical, different from others, is that we have very long-term goals and objectives, because we don't go up and down by the whim of the day. We have this steady source of authentical data that we produce, and we produce them for the users of today, but we know that the users of in 100 years will use the data that we produced, because they want to see long-term evolutions, such as we are using maps produced in 1777 for a use which was never meant in 1777, but on the biodiversity discussions today. So these are really important long-term issues which are not present in other governmental departments. They are ruled because of the whim of the day or the policy of the year, or maybe if it's a very long term, it's 3 years term. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Gabriella, Hungary.
We heard extremely interesting introductions by the panelists and also replies by the panelists. Actually, what we also should think about when we talk a lot about Gen Z people coming or not coming to our workplaces is that our workplaces are sometimes very boring, and they will remain boring for a while, because the stability of producing data will require existing procedures to go on. And of course, we need a lot of innovation, and the Gen Z generation can be really very innovative. And as Anil said, we have to take much more risks. I agree with that very much, that if we want to be on the winning side of evolution, we need to take much more risks. But the Gen Z generation will never sit into our boring seats, workplaces. On the other hand, when we do the onboarding of the new comers into our office, new staff into our office, whether Gen Z or not, sometimes it's really useful not to transmit the old institutional culture that we have, and it is a good opportunity to design a new onboarding process by which we can change the institutional structure culture much faster. So this is again an opportunity. It's a challenge, but also of course an opportunity to design new ways of onboarding, to design new ways of attracting and retaining young people. Also, we need to redesign our processes in a way, because it's not only ICT people who change fast, who leave us very fast, but other professionals also, young professionals are apt to change fast, change their jobs fast. So if we can design projects that do not last too long, and they can work into a project for, let's say, 2 years, and we expect them to leave. We don't push them, but we expect that they may leave. And our projects will be flexible enough to adapt to accept new people who will join the project. That is also helpful in our redesigning our processes. Thank you.
Thanks, Ingrid. I think you want to react.
Yes, about the boring workplace and the boring work we do. I think it's boring to some people, but there are people who are really very much interested in doing the same job 1,000 times again. And I'm talking about people who have autism spectrum disorder. And we should, well, but I'm not joking. I'm not joking. These are very valuable people that you should look at and see if you can employ them in your environment. And the challenge that you have is how to make them feel okay in your environment. But the possibilities of home working, and there are organizations today who manage those people and who take them so that they can make available their incredible ability to work and to do quality assessment and make this available to organizations like us. And I don't know if such an organization exists in your country. We have such employers really designed around them, and they are the best testers you can have, the best data checkers. And so if this organization exists in your country, talk to them, because you have perfect jobs for these kinds of people. Thank you.
Thanks, Ingrid. And I think the nature of our work is changing. I think a lot of the repetitive work is actually being replaced and is being removed from our work through things like machine learning, artificial intelligence.
But you have to train your machine.
Absolutely, you do.
That's
Yeah.
where you need them.
Yeah, yeah. Juan Daniel, Colombia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the case of Colombia, we saw the pandemic an opportunity of accelerating, for example, the appropriation of the GSBPM model, because we understood that we needed to satisfy user needs, that we do not only deliver products or statistical products, but we produce services. And this helps us a lot to make our staff and the disciplinary teams to interact among each other, because in the physical headquarters of the National Statistics Office, you have sections or areas. That you have the geostatistical area, you have the national accounts area, but sometimes those areas are barriers to the interdisciplinary dialogues that we have to foster in a statistical organization in order to foster innovation. So we believe that this virtuality approach was very helpful in order to allow the conversations that probably were so difficult to have for some let's say, culture that we had in the past. And at the same time, we believe, we performed some surveys, we have more than 81% of the staff that are feeling comfortable working from home. And this also helped us to understand that the statistical offices, we have an operational layer which cannot be virtual in some countries. For example, in the case of Colombia, the collection and compilation of information requires in-person surveys in rural areas, that we need people to get accountable about these operational dimensions, because sometimes as statistical offices, we become so scientific and we just think about the central headquarters that we are processing and analyzing and defining good ways of dissemination of statistical information. But in some sense, we are performing knowledge management tasks because we are transforming answers from surveys that sometimes we should perform in person into information for our society. So I believe that this is something that taking into account the questions regarding the interaction with values, that we should to improve the collaboration perspective that should happen at the statistical offices, and at the same time we should be inclusive, because we should understand the specific situations of all our staff members. And if virtuality is going to help the organization to become more inclusive, that will be perfect in order to be a better institution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juan Daniel. I think we've had a really interesting discussion, and I think it just kind of amplifies and highlights the challenges we're facing from a leadership and a management perspective, not to mention all the statistical stuff we've been talking about. So maybe just to finish off, I might just give each of the panelists a minute, 1 minute each. And Maria, I'm going to turn to you at the end as well, just to hear your observations. And we'll bring it to a close, because I think we could talk about this forever, actually. I think we'd still have a lot of discussion after that. So Elsa, I just want to give you the floor first.
Sorry, Patrick. Please, can you repeat again? I had problems in hearing you.
Okay, no, it's just a final wrap up, Elsa. I just want to maybe just your reflections in a minute, if you can, on the conversation and how you see things moving forward from here.
Yeah, thank you. In fact, we need to work as to be as an ecosystem, and for this, it's really so necessary to offer some guidelines on the mixed mode working possibility, to ensure that all the standardization with the other countries and take into consideration the best practices that are implemented till now in the different countries. In fact, an active role in this situation now plays a partnership with the other institutions and between the national statistical offices between the countries. On the other side, I want to mention the communication tools. The communication is really very important to be mentioned in the situation that we are now after the COVID, as to tell the story through numbers, it's not an easy way. Only from statistical office, it can be in a standard way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elsa. Ingrid, a minute if you can.
I can.
I don't doubt it.
One of the core values that as a statistical ecosystem you put forward is collaborative. And I really think that's the key word. And I would like to encourage all of you to take this as your prime value for the next period, because this is this is to me the remedy to all the stress, to all the frustration and so on that we had during COVID. And it's also going to help us to step up to the next level so that as data providers, we can live up to the expectations of the rest of the world in saying, okay, we have to solve these important issues. How do we start? Well, you start from where you are, and where you are is your data. So I think that's, for me, the wrap up of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ingrid. Mark and then Neil, we'll go in sequence as we are positioned.
Thanks. Three thoughts from me probably. So one is, it would be very easy to see a lot of this as a threat, and I don't know about your organizations, but certainly some of the less or more conservative thinkers in the organization do see it as a threat, whereas actually I think what we've talked about a lot is the opportunity, and we've got to turn it around and see it as an opportunity. I think secondly, again, come out today, there is no one thing that fixes all of this. There are so many different parts of this, and you've got to think about all of those parts, and you've got to think about how all of those parts fit together. And so thinking about it as a complex system of actually an organization is well worth doing. And then third thought, while I said there's no one thing, I think a key to this, and probably the key to getting it right, is the leadership and the people leadership and the focus on leadership and really understanding our people, be they Gen Zs who we've talked a lot about today, or anyone else who works for us, thinking really a lot about our people and how we actually motivate them, because there is no one thing that's going to work for everybody. It's going to work, different things are going to work for different people. And so our leaders really need to get to know our people, get to know their people as individuals and what works for them. So that's me. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to show you a video. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. I think my colleagues have talked about leadership, and actually we're really, really well placed because we understand statistics and data like nobody else. And so, I'll give you a couple of examples to illustrate the point about how going forward, these two intersections are really our strategic advantage. So we hire about 350 students in a given year. Well, after they're in the office for 3 weeks, we ask them, are you doing something exciting? Are you liking what you're doing? Because if you don't, tell us, we'll move you to somewhere else. Would you believe we have an 85% success rate? And you know why? Because the managers know we're tracking it. And so they're not going to give them jobs to, do something meaningless kind of thing. For the first 3 years, our recruits are training, they're learning, and we're evaluating them, and we're teaching them what curiosity means. So believe it or not, we don't have a boring organization. Our folks are always searching for something interesting. And if they're not, there's a mentor that's helping them figure out how to be curious. I wanted to pick up on the comment that was made about an equitable future. We know that somebody with a disability in Statistics Canada, we take 56 days. We used to take 56 days to fully accommodate them with the type of software, the machine, the whatever it is, the environment that today we're down to 29 days. And I still think that's way too long. And we want to bring that to within a week. And we triangulated that the longer you take somebody who just starts with you with a disability, the quicker they're going to leave the organization, because they see you don't value who I am. And guess what? The data start to now change the culture that we want. And last couple things in this last little while, we started to look at look at ourselves. People of color spend a year and a half longer at level than those that do not. People with disabilities in the last little while said that they are far more hesitant to come back to the office than others. The data are staring at us and they're screaming at us. And we need to use that to actually lead our way forward. Because if we're going to have the opportunity to attract and retain the future, the answer is in the data, and we're best placed to use the data to lead ourselves forward. Thanks.
Thanks, Anil. It's a great way to sum it up. Maria, very quickly, if you can.
I'll be very brief, Padraig. So thank you so much for the opportunity to present our work today. The level of engagement, I think, reflects the relevance to all of our community. I've taken detailed notes, and we will implement that very helpful direction from this gathering into our work going forward, on which basis, if I may make reference to the proposed decision, would the group here assembled be agreeable to accept that the joint CES UN-GGIM plenary session welcomes the work by the HLG MOS Future of Work team on future work and future workplace, supports its continuation, taking into account the outcomes of the discussion here today, and very importantly, please, folks, encourages countries to join the Future of Work team and or to contribute to the development of our 3 work strands in the next year.
Okay, are we agreed with that? It's adopted. Maria, thank you for saving me a job. You got to read it out. Okay, look, I just want to thank all the panelists. I want to thank the HLG MOS team. I want to thank all those involved because I think it was a really good session. I think it's a really timely session. And Maria, thanks to you and all your team. And of course, thanks to the Secretariat. Okay, you may depart the scene. Okay. No, you're dead right. Not at all. Yeah, no, you're right. So we have Ormet joining us here for the next item. So we're on to the last item for today, I think. Yeah, the last item of the session, of the joint session. And this session is item 8D, and it's developments in data stewardship. I'm not sure that developments in data stewardship, I'm not sure that data stewardship needs much of an introduction. I think we've been talking about it for quite a long time. And I think whether we're talking with the statistical community or the geospatial community, we're all very familiar with the concept of standards and how important standards and frameworks are. And data stewardship is all around about driving those standards, driving those frameworks and moving them forward. So we have Ormet and Tomasz with us here. We're going to start with a presentation from the UNEC Task Force on Data Stewardship and a summary of the contributed papers. So Ormet, who is the Director General of Statistics Estonia, who's also chair of the task force, he's going to give the presentation. After that, Tina will present the summary of feedback received by the task force in the electronic consultation. So Ormet, the floor is yours.
Padraig, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished colleagues, and now for the feature presentation. We all been waiting for, and I hope I can give you today this magic bullet, this missing link, this holy grail, if you will, of how this data stewardship will match together with official statistics. I have 10 minutes to introduce to you the work that our task force on data stewardship has been doing so far. And let's start with the presentation. Next slide, please. First of all, quickly to introduce you that this task force did not happen from out of nowhere. It's not a standalone endeavor. The CES plenary sessions have been discussing these topics since 2019, 2020, and similar discussions at the EU and OECD and global level meetings have been taking place for years now. And what was the intention of the task force? Of course, to give us a very practical tool, if you will, how to handle these problem when we need to engage into a data stewardship, or when we need to leave our comfortable zone of producing official statistics. So here we are with our task force. Next slide, please. We started with 8 initial members who were interested in take part, and now we have 14. There are Canada, there are Finland, Hungary, Ireland, Mexico, New Zealand, Netherlands, Poland, Switzerland, United Kingdom, Eurostat, OECD, UNECA, and us, Estonia. Of course, this task force is still open for everybody who's interested to join. And so far, we have produced to you for really very early version for consideration, and would like to test whether our thinking within the task force correlates in a right way with how you perceive this topic of data stewardship. We are looking still for some feedback. We have some, which Tina will talk in a minute, but we are still looking for some feedback until 15th of July. After this round of consultation, we'll go back to the task force and take everything on board, produce a new draft version. We are still missing a part from this document. The task force was intended to also produce a maturity model for evaluation of where organizations or systems stand in regard to some normative concept, perhaps. So this is not done yet. It's gonna be. And we're gonna send out the formal draft report then next spring. And hopefully next year, the same place, we will be all ready to adopt this report, which will also exhaust the mandate of this task force. But already there has been some ideas what we could further do, like develop some recommendations and guidance to the national statistical offices, how to implement data stewardship. Well, yes, next slide, please. Let me give a quick glance at the report. It's still a very lengthy document. There's a lot of things that need to be covered. As I said, it's a work in progress. We have been attempting to write this document to executive level, but also in a way that the experts could find a reasonably good information and sound arguments how these different concepts match together. We need to, and of course, we aim to provide this document also to the other participants in the national data ecosystems. So far, we have divided the report into 6 chapters. We deal with general relationships between statistical offices and state data stewardships. We actually provide a definition in our report. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that, please do. We are dealing with the conceptual issues as well. We started yesterday with the fundamental principles and we adopted core values. This is also on our plate in the task force. And I have to say that we are unfortunately not there yet to say that, yes, we have match everywhere. Yes, everything corresponds and sits together nicely, but we are working on that. We are dealing in a report with the skills and responsibilities which are necessary to perform while having a data stewardship roles. Very importantly, we have a full chapter on communication, which is again, I think many times also during those 2 days here brought up that we are also a messengers to the general data community. And these concepts are unfortunately not very easy to understand, maybe at first glance. So we have to make efforts to explain what we mean by either the concepts, the values, or the definitions of different terms. And last but not least, the report also contains a very interesting list of different examples from countries where the data stewardship is already more or less implemented, or there are some steps taken towards this performing these tasks. And next slide, please. There are a few key insights which I'd like to brought into your attention, which have been discussed, which have brought up within the task force. I probably cannot give you the sort of exhaustive answer to those, but at least to give you some insight of what is going on within the task force. First of all, the clarity starts with definition. As I said, the issue of data stewardship is many-faced. There are many definitions. We have chosen one. I think we have rationalized it also quite well why we choose this particular one, but at least it's there. This is something we need, or we can take as a starting point to go further, because, and I must say, in different languages, sort of same words mean different things, and it needs to be adopted in this regard. But the starting point, I think, is there in this document already. Second, it's about tailoring, as I said. Yes, the language issue is one thing. When we start to talk about implementation, then we see that different approaches are must. There is no one size fits all when it comes to applying those concepts or definitions. But again, as I also said, there are some thought-provoking examples from different countries of how this can be done. The principles. We need to check and cross-check once and again whether the new tasks or the task of that data stewardship really fit together with the principles of official statistics. Again, as I said, we are not there yet, but we do keep that in mind.
About 2 minutes, Ormet, is that okay?
Yes, that's okay. We have unquestionable advantages to take a lead in the data ecosystems in regard to the data stewardship. I would say even that this is our obligation, if you will. When the data governance or data stewardship issues are being discussed in the country, I think we should be at the leading position. When it's not happening, we think in the task force that national statistical offices should take lead and start those discussions. And since I'm really short in time, let's go to the last slide, because there actually are three big issues, one elephant and maybe other animals as well in the room, which I think at some point we need to face. First of all, the issue of data or statistics, which is our focus. It is very likely that we go beyond the sort of public data realm. We go beyond the statistical realm when we talk about data stewardship. And that means that it leads to possible collision of principles, and it also raises questions about the strategic allocation of resources, because it's always a deficit of resources. Second, if we go to a wider area of data stewardship, we will need to also cover the other sources of data: business, civil society, citizen generated. And we need to ask from ourselves, where can we, where should we stop? How much of those tasks is suitable for us, and how much can we afford? And last but not least, whatever we think we want to do or need to do, the reality is hard. The resources are always limited, and we need to make choices. And those choices, as I said, sometimes if we have multiple tasks, if those tasks are not exactly compatible with each other, some sacrifices need to be made. But just to give the last cliffhanger for today, I think if we ask from ourselves, what if we not deal with this issue? What if we fail? Should we be discouraged by that? And what will happen if we not tackle this difficult task of solving for us how to incorporate new roles and tasks into our domain? What then? Can we afford that? And with this, I will end. The last slide, please. All these questions and many more will be dealt with further in the task force, so everybody is very welcome to join the task force. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ermot. And in a way, a task force given a very difficult task to try and define data stewardship and set the strategic direction. Tina, do you want to give us the electronic consultation feedback?
Yes, thank you, Predrag. I'll try to be short. We sent it for consultation, although it's kind of interim version or very draft version of the report, because we wanted to see whether the task force is on the right track. Because for the countries always who work on these task forces and such groups, I think there often this process for them is actually even more useful than the final result, because in the process they actually learn a lot and structure their thinking and so on. And always also in the task forces are those countries who are kind of most advanced in the area. But we wanted to see, is it useful also for other countries? And thanks for all countries who replied until now. 29 countries responded, but the consultation is still open, so you can respond until 15 July, as Urmet said, because the task force will continue work. We asked, is this report useful for you, as it increased your understanding of data stewardship? And all countries replied yes. And interesting was to see also what kind of, or from what regions, what level of development were those countries who responded. And here on the slide, I have just a few quotes. There were many more such responses, and it is interesting to see that we have replies there from Albania and Chile until United States and Uzbekistan. So which was very good to see for the task force. Several countries were saying that they are working on these issues right now, and therefore the report is very timely for them. For example, Albania, Chile, Israel, and Malta mentions that. And next slide, yes. All sections in the report were considered useful. Very highly appreciated were all these country examples. So we welcome, if you have good examples, you can send us more of these. Costa Rica and United States sent also examples in as replies to the consultation. But there were also some very good proposals for improvement. For example, countries asked for information about costs and benefits of the taking on the data stewardship role. Then what influence the data steward can have on trade-offs. For example, countries have to reduce administrative burden, but with reducing this burden and reporting, actually you get less data than when the governments are asking for more detailed data on all kinds of things, you are not able to provide this. Does data steward have any role in this? It was asked to identify more clearly the main messages, because there is a lot of information, but maybe not so easy to see what are the main points. And in the final report, there will definitely be an executive summary, but we are thinking also of maybe having a section on key messages. Then countries asked for elaborating in more detail a profile of a data steward, what skills, qualifications, what is the position in a statistical office. Asked for more practical and operational guidelines, because someone said that maybe it's a little bit too theoretical and we would need to see more about the practice. And an interesting comment was about this difficulty to translate the terms into national languages. And it may happen that when you translate it, then maybe actually also the definition in a national language has to be adjusted or has to be changed a bit. So yeah, there was quite short time to comment now, but as I said, it's still open until middle of July, because the task force will continue its work. And I would like to thank all countries who responded.
Thanks very much, Tina, and thanks very much, Ormet, for the presentations. I think we all know that data stewardship is something that's here with us. It's going to be a big issue for us in the years ahead. And data stewardship can and will mean different things to different people at different times. And in a way, it doesn't matter what we call it. It's what we do. It's how we influence our national data ecosystem that really matters. And that's what data stewardship is all about, because that's about positioning official statistics within that data ecosystem, setting standards, setting guidelines, and being involved in providing advice and guidance on those issues. So it's a really important block of work, and I'm sure that it's a live document, and there's still a lot of scope for input and still a lot of work to be done. But thank you very much, Ormet, to you and the team for all of the work, and thanks, Tina, for the summary. So now we're going to move on with a presentation on the policy issues related to data integration from the geospatial perspective, and that's going to be given by Tomasz. So Tomasz, you have the floor.
Thank you, Peter. As you know, many of you that work within the United Nations Group for Global Geospatial Information Management for the European region is organized within the working group, and one working group which especially deal with data integration prepare already the policy outreach paper several years ago, and I would like just to speak a little bit about this activities. So next slide, please. In the conference in 2019 in Manchester, together with the Conference of the European Forum for Geography and Statistics, UNGGIM Europe published so-called policy outreach paper. The reason was that we would like to promote, first of all, the benefits of integration of statistical and geospatial data. Secondly, to guide and give some recommendations how to improve the data integration and address all the challenges, or many of challenges and obstacles, which is on the way for full integration of data. Also, with the reason for providing the fact for evidence-based policy making and also achieving the UN Sustainable Development goals. So this outreach paper were prepared, and next slide, please. The outcome at that time were basically oriented for the policymakers as recommendations. Many of those recommendations were related with the most important part, which were communication and also the improvement of messages which we would like to send to the policymakers when they are used geospatial data, geospatial informations in the decision-making processes. We also recognize that and give these recommendations in the way how to strengthen the institutions and governance, which is also crucial. The governmental organizations or institutional arrangements, as I said, is crucial when you are dealing with the geospatial and also with statistical data, and when you try to integrate those into the specific process. And last but not least, the standards and also the quality measures and quality assessment, which is also addressed within this document. The same group, the working group on data integration, makes some evaluation of these recommendations from 2019 in year 2020. So next slide, please. When the questionnaire were sent out regarding this policy outreach paper with a quite comprehensive questionnaire divided into 5 topics about the governance and policy, about the data structures and standards, and also the sustainable development goals within Agenda 2030. So there is also the link where a more comprehensive analysis of this questionnaire is available. And after that, the group prepared so-called 12 recommendations. Next slide, please. These 12 recommendations were especially towards a more effective geospatial data integration to address this in the way to monitoring and measuring the sustainable development goals and in relation with statistical indicators. So next slide, please. I wouldn't borrow you with a lot of details about these 12 recommendations, but let's go quickly through all of them. First group is regarding the harmonization of relevant geospatial data teams, because what is usually related with data such as cadastral data, land use data, buildings data, land cover, etc. So with implementation of cadastral and land cover data as a key national authoritative data set for operationalization of sustainable development goals, indicators, measurement, and encourage European institutions to financially support the member states on the implementation of this type of data, and its regular update is a second recommendation. The third one was related with the geospatial layers generated from remote sensing or Earth observation programs such as Copernicus or other or Corinne, etc. So the fourth recommendation was related with create capacity building initiatives for national statistical institutes to take full advantage of this remote sensing data based on Earth observation results, so produce the new indicators and to increase territorial disaggregation of traditional indicators, which was already used and reported by national statistical institutions. And the fifth recommendation is in the way how we could define and implement national spatial data infrastructures, having in mind the requirements also for the statistical processes to meet the need of SDG. And the sixth one is implement consistent and stable subnational spatial units based on different geographical levels of detail, including some grid system and its correspondent model of codification to produce and disseminate coherent and comparable statistical data and indicators over time. Seventh recommendation is develop and use population grids and other grid-based statistics as a way to increase statistical and geospatial data integration, including geospatial data processing analysis to calculate some relevant indicators for SDGs. The eighth one was adopt harmonized and comparable concepts, definitions and classifications, and build consensus among geospatial agencies and national spatial statistical institutes in common thematic and technical domains. The ninth recommendation was related with ensure availability and accessibility of processing workflow, including open formats of programming codes, etc., to allow the automatization or semi-automatization extraction or of information from remote sensing sources and similar algorithm for indicator calculations. The 10th one is develop initiatives that promote availability, accessibility, and usability of geospatial data by making use of standards, metadata, quality reference frame, etc. The 11th one is increase the collaboration with researchers and data providers to take full advantage of the availability data and processing infrastructures, and also for tuning operational workflow and regular computation of SDG indicator. And the last one is increase cooperation between national statistical institutes and geospatial agencies around the geographical Europe for the calculation of SDG indicator to better addresses the territorial dimension of those indicators and to promote the relevance of geospatial data in institutional national forums for and similar events and reporting. So this was quickly, but not so quick as I want overview. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Thomas. Tina, you want to just add something?
Yes, sorry, I wanted to add something I forgot to say, because we had also some very good papers to this session. And we had a paper by the Bank of International Settlements, which provided then the view of central banks on this data governance. And I think it will be very useful to have somehow in the report and this data stewardship discussion, maybe also their view considered, because central banks are a very specific part of the statistical system in countries. We had a paper by Australia, which makes for a very good case study to be added, because they describe very well how it is set up in Australia. Then we had a paper by Colombia and Poland, which was also to this first session about the data stewardship and links with the fundamental principles. And I think this will make a very good addition to the report, because now in the report we just listed among the main principles, the fundamental principles, but it was not explained how those things are linked. And this will be a very, very useful input. And then also this view of the geospatial community in principle in data stewardship, because it was discussed earlier today that when you go really link everything with those spatial coordinates, and then the level of detail and the information that you can get out of this for people, for their businesses, it really becomes very specific, and there might be things that we need to somehow to reflect and take into account from the data stewardship perspective. So the involvement of these constituencies in the task force and then somehow reflecting their view in the report, I think will be also very useful. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. I look at my watch and it's 14:27, and I have on my agenda open discussion. So if I just want to, yes, so somebody has a burning question. Oh my God, I see a couple of questions coming up. Okay, so yeah, as people, three, it's absolutely brilliant, but as long as people are happy to stay, I'm happy to keep going. Oh, I see another one up there, Switzerland from Benjamin. So Benjamin from Switzerland, sorry. Tobias, you're first up. I'm in a
thank
hurry.
you, Chair, and thank you, Patrick, and thank you, Umut, for this great presentation of the work of the Task Force on Data Stewardship so far. Austria appreciates the work of the Task Force and the draft report so far, and we encourage the Task Force to go further and be brave and be progressive. Yes. Actually, today, Stefan Schweinfest was mentioning a national information system. From my perspective, this could consist the NSOs, but other public entities and private institutions as well. However, the system will only be able to generate reliable information from the exponential growing database if quality standards, metadata standards, interoperability applies. And hence, based on our fundamental principles as our DNA, the NSOs are, from my perspective, well prepared to take over responsibilities as national data stewards and tackle the challenge to improve the national data ecosystem. In the European Union, recently the Data Governance Act did pass the European Parliament, which defines several roles to improve the functionality of the national data ecosystem of public entities. And this could be a window of opportunity for the NSOs to take over more responsibility. Actually, if we don't do it, who will? And will this serve society better? And will this increase our relevance? I have some doubts. So I encourage the task force to go further and continue working on this great report. Thank you.
Thanks, Tobias, for your words of encouragement. I just want to take note, it's now 4:30, so the interpretation is going to stop. So we will continue in English only because there are a number of interventions and we want to give people the opportunity to input. So next on my list is Niels from Denmark.
Thank you very much, Patrick, and thank you to Umut and the task force for doing a very excellent work, including the opportunity to give more detailed comments by mid-July, which we will do. Now, everything we do in the statistical community is important, but this one is actually super important because it's about the future role of statistics and the statistical agencies. And you might not realize it, but I think that what we're dealing with now is actually the answer to the issue that we were dealing with at the agenda, the previous thing about the future of the workplace. Those who will become the data steward in the future, the national data steward, that will be just so sexy and full of purpose that we have to fight Generation C off our premises. They will flock around us. Now, I have 3 specific issues that I want to emphasize in relation to the report. All of those is actually mentioned in the report. I just want, and Umut said it's about kind of how we emphasize things. I think metadata is super important in relation to that. And metadata is the backbone of the national data ecosystem, and we know that, but a lot of people don't know that. So we need to make an even more convincing argument about that. Data law and data regulation, and our ability to actually guide people in relation to the use of and access to data is another, I think, important issue. That is what could be expected of us to be able to do that. And then I think we have to decide at the end, but the end is next year, what kind of paper this is going to be. Is it going, and I guess it's going to be an external paper, and there's already a lot of very convincing arguments, but there's also a bit of internal cuisine where we are complaining about people not taking us on when they're doing things. And I think that convincing is a better strategy than complaining. So scrap the complaining and strengthen the convincing. Thank you very much.
Really good guidance, Niels. Many thanks. I like that idea, convincing rather than complaining. That's a really good approach. So thank you very much. Joachim from Sweden.
Thank you very much, Patrick. I wanted to take the floor, especially to commend the work of the task force and for the other papers for the work that has been put forth here. And from my perspective, I've really been wrestling a lot with the question of what we actually mean when we talk about the concept of data stewardship and what the relevant understanding of it is in my context as head of the Swedish Statistics Agency. And also in this regard to develop our role appropriately in the national context. And I think that we have to remember that the national context is going to be very important in how we move forward with this role in this discussion. And what has been said here, the materials we have are very helpful in this regard. So we're very happy with the various initiatives on global, regional, and national level that increase the understanding of what could constitute a sustainable data stewardship. And I really appreciate the contributions for this session and look forward to next year's conclusion on the UNEC task force on data stewardship. It is helpful for NSOs to position ourselves and describe how we can operate in a national data ecosystem. And this calls for even better collaboration with various stakeholders, expert users, data owners, other government agencies, etc. And we do believe that the core role of producing official statistics must remain and validate other more data-related activities, such as being experts on data quality assessment or data integration. Thank you.
Thanks, Joachim. I think you've nailed it in many respects, and I think that national context is really important. So well done. Switzerland, Benjamin.
Made in Switzerland. But first of all, I want to echo also what Tina said. I think all the reports we had, I think they're very interesting and very important. And I think the work is done by UNSC, but also on the global level. We are working with the HLG, PCDB, and UNSD is doing, I think it's very interesting for us to follow that. I want to share some experience we did on the national level. I guess you know that because George, my boss, he was in Krakow in Poland and presented it. And I think it's really key we continue this discussion. But first of all, let me share a few experiences we made. First, I think it's really important when we work on the once only principle. It's part of the digitalization of the government, of the administration. And it's a key role of the statistical office to play there. And secondly, we have a metadata catalog. It's a platform, and I want to just echo also what Denmark said. I think is key of our role to define what kind of metadata we have, what kind of information we have in our government. And another point is very important. We are working on the skills that required on data stewardship. So what we do, we have a training program that is developed not only for statisticians, but also for people dealing and using our data. And it's also key, it's important for the management and not for just people working on the data itself and producing it. Finally, what we also do, we have the task to build up a data science competence center. So it's KI to find out what kind of other data are around. And I think it's the element we're working. And as you know, we made some progress in the last 2 years in Switzerland. And we're very happy we have the bilateral exchange we'll have soon with Finland and Estonia. So also thanks for your presentation on that. But what I also want to mention here, there was in the paper by the central bank, it was mentioned, there's a quote in there, one way is to go is cooperation. And I think thanks to UNSC and UNGGIM Europe, we are sitting together here. And I have a colleague from another office, he's responsible for share information. And I think it's key for us to have this dialogue within an administration, but also on international level. So I made a recommendation to go for a swim. So that's why I stop now.
It's a very good idea, Benjamin. And I think the whole concept of collaboration, cooperation, of course, is key. I think Ingrid said it earlier on. And speaking of Ingrid, Belgium, you have the floor.
I really like a lot what I hear, and I see a lot of what I hear here, which I also hear in our geospatial community. You are not the only ones who understand about the importance of metadata. This is something that we have also, that we face, how to convince others to understand. And so we think as mapping agencies or as geospatial world, we are looking at the where, and you are looking at what and how and who. And so I think if we bring that together, this is where the importance is. And so the whole concept of collaboration is really key to the success. And when this new data directive from the Commission is going to be implemented, it's important that in each of the countries, this dialogue is opened and you talk to people involved in geospatial on how to collectively, collaboratively build this data custodianship, because the geodata, that's where we can be the custodians, complementing on the data that you are the custodians. And I think it's very important. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a very important point. Very important point. Juan Manuel, Colombia.
We just wanted to thank the opportunity to contribute to such an important discussion. We believe that the relationship between the discussions that we have performed today and yesterday regarding the fundamental principles and the core values and the data stewardship role that we should play in our societies is tremendously important. And bearing this in mind, we could not pass on the opportunity to underpin the importance of the fundamental principles in the discussion of data stewardship. From our perspective, our role as stewards is not just complying with the fundamental principles, but also fostering their use outside the framework of official statistics. It has become our duty to be fundamental principles ambassadors amid the enlargement of the data ecosystem, and we are confident that those principles could be of great benefit to all the statistical producers and users, and not just for this community that witnesses their birth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juan Manuel. And finally, I think we have the Bank of International Settlements.
So you kindly refer to the Bank for International Settlements note. It shows that central bank statisticians are increasingly aware of the need to make progress in these areas, and not least to make the most of the wealth of what we call financial big data information that we collect from the private sector. And in fact, it's a key element of the new data gaps initiatives that the G20 is considering now to enhance this. So on the point that was made during the conference on the leading role of the NSO, I would really recommend to also have a view on involving central banks as an element part, as an important part of the NSS, especially given the resource constraints that you mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And of course, the system of European central banks and the central banks generally, of course, are an important part of our broader official statistical system. And I think it's very much reflected here. So we have brought up, I'm just bringing up the proposed decision, and just from a procedural perspective, because we don't have interpretation, we can't endorse or adopt the decision today. So we have to do that tomorrow morning when we have interpretation. But just so as you're all aware of, hopefully what we will adopt and endorse in the morning. So the joint CIS UN GGIM Europe plenary session welcomes the progress on the report on data stewardship, encourages other stakeholders in the statistical system and the public sector, such as central banks, geospatial agencies, other government agencies to contribute to the work. And the CES supports, the joint session supports the task force to continue and proceed with the second stage of the work to develop a maturity model and possible guidance, and finalize the report, taking into account comments from the electronic consultation. The report is planned to be submitted to the CES, to the 2023 CES plenary session for endorsement. So hopefully we can reflect on that overnight and formally adopt and endorse that in the morning. Okay, so with that, we are at the end of the second day of the CES, but more importantly, at the end of the joint session with UN GGIM. I think it's been actually very successful. I think we've had an extremely good day. And maybe before I wrap up, I just want to give Tomasz an opportunity to say a final few words. You have the floor, Tomasz.
Oh, thank you. It was great privilege to be together in such plenary, and I believe that this is next step in our common journey. So we're all looking forward for operational activities in working groups or in some other action of lines or parts of our strategical and working progress. And as we say, only together we could promote our common common goals in these areas. So thank you for this cooperation.
Okay, I can hear the hum, and once the hum starts, it's hard to stop it. But I just want to say, I think it's been a really successful day. I think one of the things we've learned today is that we actually speak the same language. We're using an awful lot of the same words. I wrote down a few: metadata, standards, quality, accessibility. So these are all words that we use every single day in our lives in the statistical world, and you're using them in the geospatial world as well. And I think there's a real recognition that it's about working together in tandem. It's kind of like hand in glove. We can't meet our needs. We can't meet the demands that are coming on us without working with you. And equally, you can't do what you need to do without working with us as well. So it's a mutually beneficial collaboration. And I think that's really come across very strongly this morning. And I think we have the strategic framework now to work through on that. What we need to develop next is some tangible projects and some tangible objectives that we can work on together. And I think the genesis of some ideas around that have come up during the conversation today, and I'm aware the conversations are already starting around that. So I think it's been really, really successful, and I think we'll look forward to the next joint session with UNGGIM. So I want to thank everybody for their participation. I also want to thank people for their patience and for their engagement. We were supposed to finish at 4:30. It's now nearly 4:45. I think it just reflects the level of importance that people attribute to this whole issue. And in particularly the last session on data stewardship, which I think is something that we're all very conscious of. So I know Tina, so if we can just hold off for one more second, I think Tina has a couple of announcements. Tina.
No, just to remind that tomorrow we start at 10, not 10:30, but at 10. And the first half an hour will be in English, and then at 10:30, the interpretation kicks in.
So everybody to bed earlier tonight than you were last night, okay?
Don't get drowned in Lake Geneva, because I think Benjamin is organizing some swimming.
Okay, everybody enjoy your evening, and we'll see you all tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. sharp. Thank you very much.